Hi everyone, Drake Pledger with Flintlock Operator. You know, since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with the frontier heroes like Daniel Boone, Simon Kinton, and all of their compatriots and the history surrounding it. I love their spirit of independence, their self-reliance, and I love this time of exploration that these men and women were a part of. And now today, I have such a privilege to be able to stand in the middle of it all. I am standing in the monument to the original Fort Boonesborough, and man, what a privilege this is. History just comes alive when you're able to partake and enjoy and observe where these real events happen. Anywhere you live next to somewhere where something in history happened. And you know, being able to come here completely dressed out is so awesome. Daniel Boone first began to explore Kentucky in 1769. And he was in Kentucky for almost 2 years straight. He hunted, trapped, and explored. During that time, he was robbed by Indians, he was pursued by the Indians, and he explored Kentucky like nobody else. And when his brother Squire traveled back east to get more supplies and sell the skins and furs that they had collected, Boone actually stayed here in Kentucky for between 3 and 4 months in the summer. And during that time, he had the opportunity to explore Kentucky like nobody else had, probably in history. He knew this area of Kentucky better than even the Indians did. And in the spring of 1775, Richard Henderson of the Transylvania Company hired Daniel Boone to lead a company of axemen through the Cumberland Gap and widen the old Indian warriors' path so settlers could get from the east to the other side of the mountains. And because Boone knew the area of Kentucky so well, he headed straight to this location on the banks of the Kentucky River. During the first siege of Boonesborough in 1777, the Indians shot one of the pioneers who went out to get water at the close spring. And not realizing that this was an ambush, Boone, as well as several of the other men, ran out to go help that poor pioneer who had been shot. And because it was an ambush, when the group of men ran out there to go help him, all the Indians piled out of the woods and charged all the men and charged the gates of the fort to try and secure it. And the settlers, Boone included, realizing that they were about to be overwhelmed, hightailed it back to the gates of the fort. And unfortunately, Boone was shot in the ankle. But there was a very special man. His was a very famous name in the annals of Kentucky history and pioneers. His name was Simon Kinton, and Simon Kinton was a giant of a man, 220 pounds, 6'4", pure muscle, and he saw the plight that Boone was in. And Simon charged out of the gates through gunfire to go get Boone, to go help his friend. And Boone, from the ground, looks up and says, "No, don't save yourself, run back to the fort." But Simon doesn't listen. Simon goes over to Boone, picks him up like a child, and puts him over his shoulders, and runs back even faster for the gates of the fort. And as he's halfway there, 2 Indians start to flank him and converge on him. Instead of trying to run between them or fight, Kinton heaves Boone off of his shoulders and knocks both of the Indians to the ground. And while he's still running, Boone, unconscious at this point, picks Boone back up and continues back to the fort. Everybody, unfortunately except that one initial man who got shot, made it back to the fort safely, and Boone made a mostly full recovery. One of the humorous anecdotes about Boonesborough actually occurred during the second siege in 1778. Daniel Boone's brother, Squire, was kind of this jack of all trades and almost this inventor type person, and he decided that the muskets and rifles and fowlers of the fort was not enough, and they needed a cannon. So he decided that he was going to hollow out a cannon out of a hickory log. So the settlers took a big old hickory log, bored a hole in the center, bound iron bands around it like a barrel, and took charges of gunpowder with anything they could shove down there, and started blasting the Indians with it. Until after the second shot, when the whole thing exploded and almost killed several people. And the Indians actually taunted the settlers for this and said, "Where's your big wooden gun?" This is the original site of Boonesborough. Now on April 1st of 1775, Daniel Boone and his group of axemen actually started work on several small huts down there in the holler. But when Boone's employer, Richard Henderson, got here on April 20th, a few weeks later, he decided to move the location of the fort down from the lower area up here to this elevated ground to be away from the river's floodwaters. In 1775, Boonesborough, like all frontier forts, would have had all the trees cleared around it for at least 100 or so yards all the way around. That way they'd be able to see anybody approaching for hundreds of yards around and be able to identify threats far more quickly. And to give you a sense of where we are, we have the original fort. About 100 yards that way, we have the river. Down that way, right over there, is where Jemima and her two friends were captured by the Shawnee and the Cherokee. Right over there, slightly down the hill, is where Daniel Boone got shot, and where Daniel Boone and a couple of the other forts leaders met with Blackfish to try and negotiate the surrender of Boonesborough, which turned into the siege of Boonesborough in 1778. So it's so amazing to get to stand here in the middle of history. Now obviously, the original fort would have been a lot bigger than this stone wall that's here presently. It would have looked something more like this. We're here at the Reconstructed Fort right in front of one of the gates. And this big field in front of me, now this is a site of one of the reenactments that they hold here. Every year in September they hold the Siege of Boonesborough, which happened of course in September of 1778. And about 60 yards out they always have the meeting between Blackfish, Boone, and a couple of the other men from Boonesborough. And just like happened in real life, the Shawnee reenactors attempt to capture the Boonesborough settlers, but the Boonesborough settlers all managed to make it inside, and that started the siege of Boonesborough in 1778. Richard Henderson designed Fort Boonesborough here, but he left the construction to Daniel Boone, and he had Boone supervise the construction. As you can see, we have a large square with blockhouses on each corner, and the walls are primarily comprised of cabins, so that way they could build cabins and build shelters and also not have to construct huge walls. So the walls make up most of the perimeter of the fort with smaller upright logs in between, and that left a really large area here in the center for any number of fort activities. And also at each corner we have blockhouses, and blockhouses are essentially going to be the fortress or the keeps of this fort. It also has two gates as well.
Question. Yes, sir. How many people was here? Okay, when it did not last long as a Transylvania company because once the Revolutionary War started, these became military outposts and the fortifications were. You had different military, North Carolina, Virginia, bringing their militias in and out of here. And if they had not held Fort Boonesborough and Fort Logan and Harrodsburg, George Rogers Clark would not have been able to go and attack Fort Vincennes and Saskatchewan. If we'd have won the war, if they had pushed us back and we'd have won the war, our boundary lines might have started at the Appalachian Mountains instead of having the Northwest Territories to the Mississippi River. I've done stuff here at the fort since 1975.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. And then I retired a few years ago, and they asked me if I wanted to work, and I thought, get paid to do my hobby. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, Squire Boon, he was a gunsmith. This would have been his gunsmith, and this would have been primarily a repair shop. Primarily. quite all the way where we know we're getting roughed out.
You see, history does not have to be something from a dusty, boring textbook or from a place far away and removed from where you live. The reality is, we all have history in our own backyards. For my part, from the humble little bank of the Kentucky River to the great battlefields where our forefathers fought, I cherish every opportunity to connect with the reality of our history. Being able to come out to places like Boonesborough to reach out and touch a snapshot of the past is what drives me to study this era of history like I do. If you're ever around eastern and central Kentucky, I hope you come out and check out all the amazing sights and talk to the wonderful historical interpreters here. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed coming along with me on this adventure, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, a comment, and be sure to smash that notification bell so you can come with me on every adventure. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a fantastic day.